Well, Felice, I'm glad you understand. And I say that because this power of understanding is actually more complicated than it sounds. It truly is. There is a truth in this life, and that is that each and every one of us, in this room, outside of this room, everywhere you go, perceive life a little bit differently. It's kind of like your fingerprints are different. You know, the way you see the world has your own sort of imprint on it, you know. And I'm going to read a little statement here in a few moments that's written by a physicist who kind of hits the nail on the head with respect to where it is we all are in our reality and how we create our own reality and what factors allow us to create that reality. It's very, very fascinating. It's kind of a circular statement. I think you'll really enjoy it. But today's talk, for those of you who are brand new online and brand new here in our center, our church, is about understanding, which is one of the powers of man, the 12 powers of man. It's out of a book that's written by Charles Fillmore called The 12 Powers of Man. And we're going through those 12 powers, and we're going to relate them to the things that Charles Fillmore understood himself, the things that he had learned along his way, what he wanted to impart to people, and how it is we might receive them. So we do that 1 week at a time, knowing as well that we're in the midst of Lent. And Lent is a pathway for us, a pathway of understanding, a pathway of understanding that we are evolving as human beings. We're evolving in this life. And our goal is to bring about our higher selves in whatever way we possibly can. And in order to do that, the perfect topic for today during the Lenten season is understanding, so that we can see ourselves in a way that allows us to make adjustments if necessary, that allows us to lean into the things that we truly believe and want to see in our lives, and to enjoy to the fullest what it is we find. So I want to thank you, Jackie, for bringing up as well this issue of affirmations. It's an important issue because we believe in prayer here. And affirmations, by the way, are prayer. It's sort of a short, truncated prayer. You know, it says something that imprints in us a methodology for change. I mean, if you're not feeling like you are that perfect, whole, and complete person that you wish to be, then that little note on your mirror, Jackie, is the perfect way to start the day. When you look in the mirror, you see that this being that you are is an emanation of the divine, that in you is the perfection or the ability to bring about some form of life which can help others, which can help yourself, and which can make this world a place that is peaceful, loving, caring, and understanding. You know, here's the deal, though. Once you understand the real power of affirmations, which is that it can change the mind of the person who is engaged in them, once you understand that, you start to see these prayers unfold in your life. You start to see the changes. Jackie, you saw your back get better. You saw the pain recede. You saw the way you thought about yourself change so that you could get a different result each and every day. So when that result started to occur, your faith levels increased. You had more faith around what it is these affirmations were doing for you. And as your faith level increased, your ability to, as we say, demonstrate or manifest through these affirmations got greater, got better, got more pronounced. And so let's say you were looking to have more effective prayer, a more effective prayer life. The fact that you were doing affirmations and seeing the changes you wanted to see created a more effective prayer life for you. It's synergistic. I hope you understand what I'm saying. When you see the results of prayer, you start to believe more fully. When you see the results of prayer, you start to have more faith in them. And as you saw the results of your affirmations, that prayer, you started to have more faith in prayer and prayer practice. And so that creates a more robust prayer life. So once you understand that about prayer, it makes no sense not to step into it. You know, I remember my first prayer was offered to me by a mentor who said, yeah, you keep telling me that you don't really pray much and, you know, you don't really know much about prayer, or you say you don't anyway. And maybe what we ought to do is ask God to give you the words for this prayer that you're about ready to say to me. And I thought, what a tricky guy. What a tricky guy. Asking God to help me pray aright. Asking God to help me pray in a way that will be beneficial to me. What a tricky guy. So, thank you for bringing that, because that's perfectly dovetails with what it is we're talking about today in understanding. So, with understanding as the power of man, we find that there is a disciple connected to this. So the disciple is Thomas. Thomas, the doubting Thomas, you see, the doubting Thomas, the one who had to understand the truth of what was actually going on after the resurrection of Jesus, because he didn't believe that Jesus had actually resurrected. He wanted to stick his fingers in the holes in the wrists. He wanted to see the piercing in the side. He wanted to absolutely be certain in the physical world that what was happening, or what appeared to be happening, was happening. And he did that. And as a result of that, he was called Doubting Thomas. But that didn't make him any less a faithful disciple. Not at all. In fact, he went on to do some really great works. And this doubting aspect, as we take a look at doubt, and we have in the past very carefully, is sort of like a doorway to faith, you see, because doubt itself motivates you to find out what's really going on, and what's really going on typically leads to something that is a greater understanding of what it is you thought it was. And so that's what he did. He gained a greater understanding of what Jesus was doing with this regenerative process, with this resurrection process, with this overcoming, if you will, of death. That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? You know, we hear that all the time in other traditions, the overcoming of death. Jesus proved that he could overcome death. Well, I have a little news for you about me, so that you can understand me better. I don't believe in dead. I don't believe in dead. And I don't think there's going to be a second coming of Jesus, by the way, either. I hope that doesn't make you think less of me, because I don't think he ever left. And I don't think that there is anything called dead, because there is this infinity of life which I'm a part of, no matter what happens to this physical body. So when you hear it from me in that way, you understand it a little better, don't you? That when I say I don't believe in dead, you understand, yeah, I can see how he doesn't believe in dead, because life is everlasting. And I am that, no matter whether my body is here or not. I am love, no matter whether my body is here or not. And you can understand what I mean by that. But I had to explain it to you. I had to explain it to you a little bit. Which is something that we all need, an explanation of what it is we're thinking about, what it is we're feeling, what it is we're knowing life to be, so that we can have the most vibrant connection possible. We're looking for vibrant connections with people. And so understanding becomes an incredibly helpful tool for us to get locked in on. Because here's the truth. I can be as upfront with you and be as succinct and define things in ways that really mean something to me, but you're going to get something different than I meant out of it. You are. It's just going to happen. I love it when people come up to me and say, I love it when you talked about, and they proceed to go into something that had nothing to do with what I had to say. And I just nod my head and go, I am so glad you got something worthwhile out of it, you know? I mean, inside of me, I'm going, I never really said that, but, you know, it's terrific that they heard what they needed to hear, you know? So, but that's happening everywhere all the time. It's happening everywhere. We're perceiving things differently. We're getting what we need to get out of it, and that's a wonderful thing. So Thomas is the disciple that's connected with understanding. And there's a color, gold, which is connected with understanding too, as determined by Charles Fillmore. And gold is precious, you know. Gold is truly precious. One of the most precious, if not the most precious of metals, and certainly was when Charles Fillmore was standing up at podiums like these. And so understanding then becomes incredibly precious too. You know, we think of faith and love and life and those aspects of man, those powers of man, as being the premier powers, but understanding is not only the premier power, but it allows you to get where you need to go and want to go if you understand it, which is circular in and of itself. So here's what I want to start with. You know, it's funny how I say, this is what I want to start with. This is like the 8th time I've said, this is what I want to start with. I know Bobby counts. Bobby's counting those. Greg, you said that 8 times. All right, so this is something that I really enjoy and appreciate. And it is a poem that was fashioned after a parable. And the parable has in it an elephant and some blind men. Anybody ever heard that poem before? Okay, all right. Well, some of you have not. And you know, I always put a little spin on things, a little twist on things, and I think that this is perfect for understanding. The poem goes like this. It was 6 men of Indostan, to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind. The first approached the elephant, and happening to fall against his broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl, God bless me, but the elephant is nothing but a wall. The second, feeling of the tusk, cried, Ho, what have we here? So very round and smooth and sharp. To me 'tis mighty clear. This wonder of an elephant is very like a spear. The third approached the animal, and happening to take the squirming trunk within his hands, I see, quote he, the elephant is very like a snake. The fourth reached out his eager hand and felt about his knee. What most this wondrous beast is like is mighty plain, quoth he. 'Tis true enough, the elephant is very like a tree. The fifth, who chanced to touch the ear, said, Even the blindest man can tell what this resembles most. Deny the fact who can. This marvel of an elephant is very like a fan. The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope, then seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope, I see, quoth he, the elephant is very like a rope. And so these men of Indostan disputed hard and long, each in his own opinion, exceeding stiff and strong. Though each was partly in the right, all of them were wrong. So oft in theologic wars the disputes, I ween, tread on in utter ignorance of what each other mean, and prayed about the elephant not one of them has seen. Whoa. Does that just kind of encapsulate what it is we go through in society? We can't even agree upon what it is that we actually have seen, let alone what we've just felt. You know, we're told, oh no, that's not what you saw. we're told, well, you saw it differently, and I saw that, in my own way. Now you go ahead and see it in your own way. It's very interesting how we create sides so we don't have to be wrong. So that poem was drafted as a result of this story about the elephant. I guess we could call it a parable. And because it may not be true, of course. Parables were not always true. To give us some sort of understanding of what it is everyone goes through under every single circumstance. So, do you know who else spoke in parables? Yeah, Jesus spoke in parables, yeah. Jesus speaking in parables is kind of an interesting aspect of what it is that we find in the Bible. There are a lot of people, a lot of individuals who see the Bible as a fundamental text, who believe that every word was inspired by God, who believe that every word within it is true. And sometimes I have conversations with such people. And I love it, by the way. I do. I absolutely love it. And my goal is to understand where they're coming from. My goal is to understand how they feel about their religion, about their way of life. My goal is to understand what it is that they want from readings out of the Bible, what it is they want from Jesus himself, Jesus as that human persona and Jesus as that divine entity. As we lead up to Easter, we really start seeing the evidence that Jesus moved from phase to phase to phase through the human to the divine. And that's the process of this regenerative or regenerative process. And so as we see that, we get an opportunity to kind of review what the rest of the world might be seeing as happening during this time. I got a chance to do just that yesterday. Yesterday I had an old friend of mine who happens to be taking classes at one of the churches that is local in our particular area near Chino Hills. And it is a traditional evangelical church. And in this class, there's a midterm assignment, and that assignment was to interview somebody of a different faith tradition. And so he gave me a call and asked if I'd be interested in doing that. And I was, and I am, and I did, and I do. And I absolutely loved spending time with this old friend that I hadn't seen in a while. We got to sit down and talk about this list of questions that he had. He had like 16 different questions, and they all came from a perspective that is something that I no longer hold. The perspective that God is separate from us, that God is somehow out there, that there's an anthropomorphic man-like being out there that sits on a throne and maybe has a beard like this. And is very much like that figure up on the top of the Sistine Chapel. Is that in the Sistine Chapel? Where he reaches out and creates man, with the finger, the power of God, you see. But it's an anthropomorphic vision. It's a man, looks like a human being, just a little larger. You might, in your mind in a church, see that person, behind me or whatever. That was how each and every one of those questions was drafted, with that anthropomorphic vision. And so you can imagine where I had to start when I reviewed those questions, looked at them, and decided how I was going to answer them. I had to start with a different paradigm. You see, there are two paradigms. One is that God is separate from us, the anthropomorphic vision of a big man on a throne, making things happen, pointing things out, receiving prayer and being too busy. All of those things that happen with this anthropomorphic God. And the other paradigm is that God is all. God is all that is. God is in, around, and through everything, as everything. As Richard Rohr says, God simply loved you so much, God became you. So everything created out of this divine resource, this divine life-giving source, this creative energy, everything created out of it is that which the divine is. There is nothing outside of this infinite divine aspect of God. Nothing. Nothing. Imagine trying to explain that to somebody who sort of has in his DNA this idea that God is on a throne somewhere with a long beard and probably very, very angry. Well, you may have had that opportunity yourselves. But I started with explaining what I believe, not what he should believe. So, that's the only way we got into this conversation that included an understanding of where he was and where I was, so that we could kind of meet in there and get a feel for what it is we believe. So I had to set that stage for the way that I was going to answer every single one of those questions. Every single one of the questions was affected by the way I perceive God, by the way I perceive this power, by what I nestle up to. The manner in which I see God was so foreign to him that you should have seen his eyes. Kind of like... So when I saw that, I knew I had to slow down a little bit. Not that I'm right. It's just different. It's just different. We spent about, when I do something, I like to do it right, 6 hours together. A long time talking about this kind of stuff, but we had a really, really beautiful time talking about it. And there were some things, I think, that were eye-opening for him. There were some things that seemed to have the ring of truth, that touched him in a way that he probably never thought they would. And I do know this, by the way, by the teacher, the pastor, in that particular class, he was warned not to listen too deeply. Because some sort of an unauthorized conversion could happen, you see. You don't want an unauthorized conversion to take place. And so we had to laugh about that too, So, he became aware after we spoke that there was and he had to actually kind of admit to himself that his teacher, being well versed in not just his own religion but in other religions, had to understand that that's a possibility. The things I've been talking about are a possibility in the spiritual world, in the world of other religious orders, that people believe this in a lot of different ways in Buddhism and Hinduism. They believe it not just in New Thought churches, but they believe this oneness aspect in Orthodox Christian churches. These are precepts that have been around a long time. So he had to believe that his teacher knew these things, yet was very closed about even talking about them. And the questions being of the ilk of actually trying to exclude those ideas from even being discussed. He was well aware of that too. And so there was no mind changing, but there was sort of a lifting of the eyelids, if I can, give you kind of the feel of that. In places he was blind, the eyelids were lifted. In places I was blind, the eyelids are lifted. But here's what we did. We met in the middle in love. That's what we did. And you see, that's what understanding is about. Understanding isn't just about the connection that we have in the physical world. Understanding is also about the feel we have around these conversations and relationships and discussions from a spiritual level, and most certainly from an emotional level. So it's not just physical. Understanding is not just understanding what it is you see. It's understanding what it is you feel. It's understanding what at depth, a deep, deep place, what's happening to you and through you and around you and for you at that level. It's trying to get an understanding of that as well. These are all the things that shape your reality. They definitely shape your reality. So this physicist I've been talking about. He's a quantum physicist, not just a regular physicist. Quantum. Many of us understand a little bit about quantum physics, and what quantum physics tends to teach us about our own choices. How our choices actually are brought to us based upon what it is we're thinking, believing, and focusing on. So if you've ever seen any studies around quantum physics, a quantum physicist will say, well, there are a whole bunch of different possibilities out there. It's the one you're focusing on is the one you bring about. That's kind of hard to understand. But it sort of has to do with this view of life that David Bohm, anybody ever heard of David Bohm? He's like the guru of quantum physics, talks about. He says, reality is what we take to be true. What we take to be true is what we believe. What we believe is based on our perceptions. What we perceive depends on what we look for. What we look for depends on what we think. What we think depends on what we perceive. Now it's going, the circle is coming back fully. What we perceive depends upon what we believe. What we believe determines what we take to be true, and what we take to be true is our reality. Wow. You come at it backwards and you recognize that thinking is the touchstone, the seed of what it is we take to be our reality. When we start this poem, we start with a definition of reality, which is what we take to be true. How do we get there? How do we take it to be true? Do we have enough information? Do we need more? What do we do in such circumstances where we're going to be making really, really tough decisions around what it is we perceive in life? What do we do? And there are a whole bunch of ways to do that. A whole bunch of ways to think about, what it is our task is going to be beyond just physical awareness. We have to use our emotional intelligence, our spiritual reflection. We always reflect. We take a holistic approach and integrate all of these together. And then we seek a perspective which might be having a conversation with each other. It might be not only meeting in a class or a group or after service and talking about these things, but listening to people when they talk. Wow, understanding is deep. It really, really is deep. There's so much to get, so much to understand. It'll never happen unless you listen. It'll never happen unless you step into conversations that are tough with an open mind and not a desire to change someone. So, I don't know about you, but I love life. I really do. I love life. I see it in you. I feel it in me. And when I see it in you, I see the God in you. And what do I say when that happens? Namaste. Namaste. Amen. Thank you. Thank you.